English Daily, the podcast.
Your English journey starts now. Welcome back to English Daily Podcast. I'm Anna, your co-host, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today for another exciting episode.
And I'm Jack, your fellow English learner and teacher. Anna, I can barely contain my excitement because today's episode is going to be absolutely transformational for our listeners.
Absolutely, Jack. Today, we're diving deep into our C1 Advanced Vocabulary Masterclass, specifically designed to help you master everyday English speaking in 2026. This is the episode you've been waiting for.
That's right, Anna. We're going to focus on what I call the triple exposure method, a revolutionary approach to vocabulary retention that combines auditory, visual, and contextual learning. Trust me, after today, you'll never look at vocabulary learning the same way again.
But Jack, before we dive in, I want to give a huge shout out to our listeners who have been with us on this journey. You are incredible, and your dedication to improving your English is truly inspiring.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are new here, welcome to the English Daily Podcast family. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who wants to elevate their English to C1 proficiency.
Subtopic 1. Understanding the power of B2 level academic verbs. Jack, let's start with the strategic hook you mentioned, mastering the B2 level academic verbs. Why is this so crucial for C1 learners?
Great question, Anna. You know, when I was learning English, I thought advanced vocabulary meant learning obscure, rarely used words. But actually, the real game changer is mastering everyday academic verbs that native speakers use constantly in professional and casual contexts.
Wait, so you're saying that words like advocate, implement, and quantify are actually used in everyday conversations, not just academic papers?
Absolutely, Anna. I remember the first time I heard my American colleague say, "We need to quantify the impact of this project" during a casual lunch conversation. I was shocked because I thought quantify was only for research papers.
That's so interesting, Jack. Can you give us another example from your experience?
Of course. Just last week, I was having a coffee with a friend who works in marketing, and she said, "We need to advocate for more flexible working hours." Now, advocate, that's a B2 level verb that sounds very academic, right? But there it was, in a casual conversation about work-life balance.
That's fascinating. So these academic verbs are actually hiding in plain sight in everyday English. How does this connect to the triple exposure method?
Great transition, Anna. The triple exposure method is specifically designed to help you internalize these verbs so deeply that they become part of your natural speaking vocabulary. Let me break it down.
Please do. I'm sure our listeners are as curious as I am.
Educational. First, we have auditory exposure. This means listening to these verbs in real conversations, podcasts, movies, and music. Second is visual exposure, seeing these verbs in written form, in context, on signs, in articles, and in subtitles. And third is contextualization, actually using these verbs yourself in meaningful, personalized sentences.
Oh, so it's not just about memorizing definitions. It's about encountering these words in multiple ways and using them ourselves. That makes so much sense.
Exactly. And research shows that vocabulary learned through triple exposure has a retention rate of up to 85% compared to just 20% for traditional memorization methods. That's the power of this approach.
I love that statistic, Jack. Our listeners should be taking notes right now because this is gold. So, how do we start applying this method practically?
Excellent question. Let's start with our first verb, advocate. Now, Anna, can you give us a simple definition that our listeners can understand?
Of course. To advocate means to publicly recommend or support a particular cause, policy, or group. It's like being a voice for something you believe in.
Perfect. Now let's build our triple exposure for advocate. For auditory exposure, I want you to start noticing how often TV hosts, YouTubers, and even your friends use this word. For visual exposure, try reading one English article daily and highlight any instances of advocate. And for contextualization, I want you to create 3 personal sentences using advocate.
That's such a practical exercise, Jack. And remember, listeners, consistency is key. Even just 10 minutes of focused vocabulary practice daily can transform your English over 6 months.
Anna, I'm so glad you emphasized consistency. I always tell my students that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Small daily efforts compound into massive results over time.
You know, Jack, this reminds me of my own journey. When I first moved to London, I was so intimidated by native speakers who seemed to effortlessly use these sophisticated verbs. But I started keeping a vocabulary journal, and within a year, I was using words like advocate naturally in conversations.
That's such an inspiring story, Anna. Thank you for sharing that. It really shows that anyone can achieve fluency with dedication and the right method.
Thank you, Jack. And I hope our listeners feel empowered, knowing that if I could do it, they definitely can too.
Okay, Anna, let's move to our second verb, implement. This is another powerhouse word that's essential for C1 proficiency.
I love implement, Jack, but I have to admit, I sometimes confuse it with apply or put into action. Can you clarify the distinction?
Fantastic question. Implement specifically means to put a plan, decision, or agreement into effect. It's often used in professional contexts when discussing strategies, policies, or new systems. While apply is more general, implement carries a connotation of systematic, structured execution.
So it's more about the deliberate, structured carrying out of a plan. That makes sense. Can you give us some real-world examples?
Absolutely. Here are some common collocations. Implement a new policy. Implement a strategy. Implement changes. Implement a system. And implement a program. Notice how they all involve some form of organized execution?
That's really helpful, Jack. I'm writing these down. What about in everyday conversations? How would a native speaker use implement casually?
Great question. Here's a casual example. Our gym just implemented a new booking system, and honestly, it's so much easier now. Or, we're planning to implement weekly team meetings starting next month. See? It's not just for formal presentations.
I never thought of implement being used in such casual contexts. This is eye-opening. How can our listeners practice using this word naturally?
Here's my recommendation. Every time you talk about something you're planning to do this week, try to use implement instead of simpler words. For example, instead of saying, I'm going to start exercising, try saying, I'm going to implement a new exercise routine. It feels unnatural at first, but that's exactly how fluency develops.
I love that exercise, Jack. It's so practical. Now, can we talk about the third verb you mentioned? Quantify. I find that one particularly challenging.
Of course, quantify means to express or measure something as a number or quantity. It's all about turning something abstract into measurable data.
So it's closely related to numbers and measurements?
Exactly. Common collocations include quantify the impact, quantify the results, quantify the cost, quantify the benefits, and difficult to quantify. This last one is particularly useful. The benefits are difficult to quantify is a very natural phrase in professional contexts.
Oh, that's a great one. I'm definitely using that in my next work meeting. Can you give us a casual usage example, Jack?
Sure. Here's a natural conversation example. I've been trying to quantify how much time I spend on social media, and it's actually shocking. Or, it's hard to quantify exactly how much better I feel after starting yoga, but there's definitely a difference.
Those examples are so relatable. I can definitely imagine using those phrases in everyday conversations. This is what makes C1 English so powerful. You can discuss both professional topics and personal experiences with equal sophistication.
Exactly, Anna. And that's what distinguishes B2 from C1. At C1 level, you can use these sophisticated words naturally in any context, whether you're discussing business strategy or talking about your weekend plans.
That's the goal, everyone. And remember, we're here to help you get there. Keep practicing and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we learn.
Anna, I think it's crucial that we don't just teach individual words, but also show how they combine into powerful phrases. This is what I call vocabulary chunking, and it's essential for natural-sounding English.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jack. Collocations have been a game changer for my own English. Can you give us some examples with our target verbs?
Absolutely. Let's start with advocate. Here are powerful collocations. Advocate for change. Advocate for human rights. Strongly advocate. Publicly advocate. And continue to advocate.
I'm writing these down. What about implement?
Great. For implement, successfully implement, begin to implement, plan to implement, fully implement, and implement effectively. Notice how successfully implement and effectively implement add that extra layer of sophistication?
Yes, that's exactly what takes your English from good to great. And for quantify,
For quantify, accurately quantify, hard to quantify, impossible to quantify, attempt to quantify, and quantify the exact. These are the phrases that native speakers use constantly.
you know, Jack, I remember when I first learned these collocations, it was like unlocking a secret level in a video game. Suddenly, I could express myself with so much more precision and sophistication.
I had a similar experience, Anna. When I learned that strongly advocate sounds much more natural than just advocate, it completely changed my professional presentations.
That's such a great point, Jack. And here's my tip for our listeners. When you learn a new word, always learn at least 2 or 3 collocations with it. That's how you sound like a native speaker.
Absolutely. And one more thing, pay attention to register. Some collocations are more formal, like implement policy changes, while others are casual, like implement a new game plan. Context matters.
That's such an important distinction, Jack. Thank you for emphasizing that. Now, let's make sure our listeners have a clear action plan for today.
Great idea. Here's today's vocabulary challenge. Choose one of our 3 verbs, advocate, implement, or quantify. Then learn 3 collocations for that verb. Finally, use each collocation in a personal sentence. Do this for all 3 verbs by the end of the week, and you'll have 9 new phrases in your active vocabulary.
I love that challenge, Jack. It's manageable, practical, and most importantly, it gets results. Our listeners should definitely try this. Jack, I think it's time for some role play. Let's demonstrate how these verbs can be used in realistic conversations. Are you ready?
Absolutely, Anna. Let's do this. I'll start. Imagine we're colleagues discussing a new project at work.
Sounds fun. Go ahead, Jack.
So, I've been thinking about our team's productivity, and I really think we need to implement some changes to our workflow. What do you think?
That's interesting, Jack. I agree that we could be more efficient, but can you be more specific about what changes you're proposing?
Well, I've been tracking our daily tasks for the past month, and I've tried to quantify exactly how much time we spend on each project. The results are pretty eye-opening. We're spending almost 30% of our time on administrative tasks that could be automated.
30%? That's significant. I had no idea it was that much. So what do you suggest we do?
I think we need to advocate for a new project management system. I've researched several options, and I believe implementing this software would not only save time, but also improve our collaboration significantly.
That sounds promising, Jack. But implementing new software can be challenging. How are we going to handle the training aspect?
Great question. I've already created a detailed proposal. My plan is to implement a phased rollout, starting with a small team, gathering feedback, making adjustments, and then expanding to the entire department. This way, we can quantify the impact at each stage.
That's a really thoughtful approach, Jack. I think I could definitely advocate for this proposal in our next management meeting. You've clearly put a lot of thought into it.
Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate your support. And you see, we just used all three of today's key verbs naturally in a single conversation.
Exactly. That's the beauty of this episode, everyone. These verbs aren't just academic, they're practical tools for real communication. And with practice, you'll be using them as naturally as we just did.
Let me break down what we just did in that conversation. I started by suggesting we implement changes. Then I quantified the time spent. Then I said we should advocate for a new system. That's exactly how native speakers structure these ideas.
And notice how the conversation flowed naturally? We didn't sound overly formal or academic. We sounded like two professionals discussing a real business challenge. That's the C1 level.
That's the goal, Anna. And here's your homework. Try to have a conversation this week where you naturally use at least one of today's key verbs. It could be about work, your hobbies, or even just planning your week. Practice makes perfect.
Jack, let's take it up a notch. I want to explore some advanced expressions and idiomatic usages related to our target verbs. Are you ready?
I'm always ready to go deeper, Anna. Let's do this.
First question. Are there any idioms or expressions that use advocate, implement, or quantify?
Great question. While these verbs don't have many idioms per se, they do appear in various fixed expressions. For example, advocate for change, which is very common in activism contexts. On the implementation phase, that's a business expression, and the numbers don't quantify it. That's a poetic way of saying something is beyond measurement.
Those are really useful. What about more advanced or formal usages? I know C1 learners need to be able to handle nuanced language.
Absolutely. Here are some advanced expressions. Advocate on behalf of, very formal. Implement with immediate effect, business English. Quantify something to the nearest decimal, technical, and advocate passionately for, emphasizing strong belief.
I'm loving these advanced expressions, Jack. They really add depth to your English. Can we also discuss synonyms? That helps expand vocabulary range.
Excellent point. Let's cover synonyms. For advocate, alternatives are support, promote, champion, back, and defend. For implement, alternatives are execute, carry out, put into practice, enforce, and deploy. For quantify, alternatives are measure, calculate, assess, estimate, and evaluate.
This is gold, Jack. Knowing synonyms is so important for C1 level English. It shows range and sophistication. How do you suggest we practice using these synonyms?
Here's my strategy. When you learn a new word, create a synonym web around it. Connect the word to its synonyms, antonyms, and related expressions. This creates a dense network in your memory that makes retrieval much easier.
I love that visual of a synonym web. It's such an effective technique. And for our listeners who want to go even further, I recommend keeping a vocabulary map in a notebook or digital app.
Absolutely. And don't forget about word families. For example, from advocate, we get advocacy, noun, advocate, as in he's an advocate for change, and advocacy, the practice. Understanding word families multiplies your vocabulary exponentially.
That's such an important insight, Jack. And here's something I've noticed. When you understand word families, you can guess the meaning of unfamiliar words. For example, if you know advocate, you can probably figure out what advocacy means.
Exactly, Anna. That's the power of building strong vocabulary foundations. You become not just a vocabulary consumer, but also a vocabulary detective. Anna, let's talk about the bigger picture now. How can our listeners actually integrate these verbs into their everyday speaking at C1 level?
That's such an important question, Jack. I think it comes down to three key strategies. First, deliberate practice in speaking. Second, extensive listening to native speakers. And third, fearless usage in real conversations.
I love that framework. Let's unpack each one. For deliberate practice, I recommend shadowing. That means listening to a native speaker and then immediately repeating what they say, trying to match their intonation and pace.
I've done so much shadowing in my English learning journey, Jack. It's uncomfortable at first because you feel silly, but it's incredibly effective. Your mouth literally learns to form the sounds automatically.
Absolutely. And for extensive listening, I recommend podcasts like this one, native speaker YouTubers, Netflix shows with subtitles, and audiobooks. The key is to listen for at least 30 minutes daily.
And the most important part, don't just passively listen. Actively note down phrases, collocations, and expressions that catch your attention. That's where the real learning happens.
That's such a crucial point, Anna. Passive listening alone won't make you fluent. You need active engagement. Now for the third strategy, fearless usage. This is where most learners struggle.
I know exactly what you mean, Jack. Fear of making mistakes holds so many people back. But here's the truth. Native speakers respect anyone who tries to communicate, even with errors. What matters is the attempt.
Exactly. I always tell my students, a C1 speaker who makes mistakes is infinitely better than a B1 speaker who never tries. Every mistake is a learning opportunity.
You know, Jack, I remember being so afraid to speak in meetings at my first job in London. But one day, I just decided to contribute one idea using our target verb. I said, I think we should implement a feedback system. And you know what? My manager loved it. That moment changed my confidence forever.
That's such an inspiring story. And here's my advice to everyone. Start small. Use one new phrase a day in a real conversation. By the end of a month, you'll have 30 new phrases in your active vocabulary.
That's the power of consistency, Jack. Small daily actions compound into massive results. I truly believe that anyone can achieve C1 fluency with the right method and mindset. Jack, let's do a quick vocabulary recap. Can we list all the key phrases we covered today?
Absolutely. Let's go through them systematically. From today's episode. 1. Advocate. To publicly recommend or support a particular cause. 2. Implement. To put a plan or decision into effect. 3. Quantify. To express or measure something as a number. 4. Advocate for change. To support or promote transformation. 5. Implement a strategy. To put a strategic plan into action. 6. Quantify the impact. To measure the effect of something. 7. Strongly advocate. To vigorously support or recommend. 8. Fully implement. To completely put into practice. 9. Hard to quantify. Difficult to measure or express numerically. 10. Advocate for human rights. To support or promote human rights. 11. Implement a new system. To introduce and use a new system. 12. Accurately quantify. To measure precisely. 13. Publicly advocate. To openly support or recommend. 14. Plan to implement. To intend to put into action. 15. Attempt to quantify. To try to measure or calculate.
That's 15 powerful phrases, Jack. And remember, listeners, these are just from today's episode. Imagine if you did this every day for a year, you'd have thousands of phrases at your fingertips.
Exactly, Anna. And the beautiful thing is that these phrases work for both formal and informal contexts. That's the versatility of C1 level English.
Jack, let's move to our reflection questions. These are designed to help our listeners internalize what they've learned today.
Great idea, Anna. Here are our reflection questions for our listeners. Which of the three target verbs, advocate, implement, or quantify, do you find most challenging to use naturally? Why do you think that is? 2. Can you think of a recent situation where you could have used one of today's key verbs but didn't? What held you back? 3. How often do you currently practice new vocabulary? What changes could you make to incorporate the triple exposure method into your daily routine? 4. What collocations with our target verbs surprised you the most today? Which ones will you start using immediately? 5. In your professional or personal life, what changes would you like to implement in the coming months? How can you use today's vocabulary to discuss these plans? 6. What causes or ideas are you passionate about that you could advocate for more confidently using your improved vocabulary? 7. How could you quantify your English learning progress over the next 6 months? What metrics would be meaningful to track? 8. What's one advanced expression or synonym from today's episode that resonated with you? How will you integrate it into your speaking? 9. How has your perspective on academic vocabulary changed after listening to this episode? What assumptions have you let go of? 10. What specific action will you take this week to practice using at least one of today's key verbs in a real conversation?
These questions are so powerful, Jack. I encourage everyone to write down your answers. The act of writing reinforces learning dramatically.
Absolutely, Anna. And don't worry about perfect answers. The goal is to reflect, engage, and take action. That's how transformation happens.
Jack, we're nearing the end of another incredible episode. Any final thoughts for our amazing listeners?
Jenna, I just want to say how proud I am of everyone who listened to this entire episode. You've taken a significant step towards C1 fluency today.
That's so true, Jack. And I want to thank each and every one of you for choosing English Daily Podcast as your learning companion. You're investing in yourselves, and that deserves recognition.
Remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Every new phrase you learn, every conversation you have, and every mistake you make brings you closer to fluency. Embrace the process.
And please, don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with friends, classmates, or colleagues who are also working on their English. Learning is more powerful when shared.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to English Daily Podcast, leave a review, and check out our previous episodes on advanced vocabulary and speaking practice.
Next week, we're going to dive even deeper into advanced English vocabulary, so stay tuned. In the meantime, practice those verbs, use those collocations, and most importantly, believe in yourself.
That's it for today, everyone. I'm Jack, and this has been another episode of English Daily Podcast. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep speaking.
Thank you for listening, everyone. See you next time. Bye for now.
Bye, take care, and remember, you've got this.
Your learning journey doesn't stop here. Keep improving your English. Click the next video or explore more episodes we've picked just for you. See you in the next lesson.